So good morning, everybody, at least for me on the West Coast here in San Francisco. And sharing this morning around some content that focuses on virtual events and some ideas about how they could be a bit better. And in the spirit of healthy plagiarism, this is actually a blog that I wrote earlier. So I'm plagiarizing from myself, you could say, for the presentation. It's a 7-minute read, and it'll probably be hopefully within a 10 to 15-minute presentation. So if you wanted to refresh the content later, I can share the link to the blog that I've written, which is for a relationship that I have with the agency called Velocity Partners. And to explain the different logos that you'll see, Soho Syndicate is my own media and marketing consultancy, primarily around business development and commercial development. And I'm on retainer with Velocity Partners and a few other agencies to help them with business development and commercial development. So we'll dive in. So over my career, whether it was for Business Week or for agencies or industry associations, I've been involved in a lot of events. And although they could be aggravating, especially when they don't exist, with rose-colored glasses, it feels a bit like we're really missing something. The component or the contribution of live events, especially to B2B marketing, was absolutely critical. And now that we don't have them, you really miss them. And I guess particularly so when you think about how bad a lot of online events are. And it's not just the quality of the content or the platform that they might be on, but just simply the overall volume of events that you're meant to want to, even if you wanted to participate in the opportunities that you have in online events, there's not enough hours in the day for the rest of your life to consume the content that's available, because there's an awful lot of content that was previously charged that's now for free, and there's just a lot of them. So kind of looking at a bit of the background of this, you start to see anecdotal evidence that people are starting to plan live events again. At least you kind of hear it in conversation that people are saying, well, maybe we'll do a hybrid event, or maybe we'll do a live event sometime soon. We're starting to plan. And that's absolutely true from some research that I've included in the blog post from North Star Meetings Group that do a survey of online planners or event planners, that people are planning, or optimistically they're rescheduling events that they didn't get to do last year or had to do in an online experience. But the reality of it is their next live event, for the most part, if you look at this year versus previous years, there's not many that are actually likely to happen. Certainly not until the kind of latter part of this year. And that's if you look at the previous research, because this is a piece of research that's done quarterly. It's a rolling it's a rolling schedule, because people keep thinking it's going to be in 2 or 3 quarters, and every time they do the research, it's revised to the next 2 or 3 quarters. So there's a fair number of the people that were surveyed here that don't expect to be doing live events actively, potentially until next year, which seems a very long time away, considering that we've already been in shelter and COVID for a year already, and it seems like an eternity. So, with that in mind, the difficulty, again, that I said earlier, is that there's just a wall of white noise of webinars and events, some good, some bad, but they all kind of get mixed in, and it's hard to be able to tell the difference and stand out. So, in the end, what's happening is that if people are actually paying attention, a lot of times they're not really, if they're signing in, they may or may not be paying attention. And that's the biggest pain point, is that a lot of time and effort goes into producing these events for people to participate, and they might be signing in, but if they're not actually paying attention, if it's kind of the TV on in the background, then there's a lot of investment that's being made by our efforts to market and to sell, and it's going for naught because people aren't actually engaging. So I say this as a preamble, really just to get into the 8 suggestions that I've included in the blog post. The blog post kind of talks about what you could do better. And I think just before we dive in, I thought this was an interesting data point. Not only are online events not great, but apparently, according to the survey, they're getting worse, at least in the eyes of the creators. Their view of whether they're actually producing online events that meet their expectations has literally gone down in the last 3 to 4 months, and it's kind of going down almost every time they do the research. So, with that in mind, like I say, we wrote this blog post not saying that this was the absolute best practice or kind of authoritative steps to doing online events. It was more just saying, here's a few ideas that might help you do them a bit better and hopefully be more likely to engage with people. So this was published on the Velocity website a few weeks ago, and one of the clients that they work with is Salesforce. And Salesforce, as you well know, produce a huge event called Dreamforce, and not everybody has the 6 to 7 figure budgets that Salesforce has to produce this type of an event. It's certainly one of the largest live events. When they're doing live events, it's literally in the 6 figure attendance levels. And they had huge numbers that came to the digital program, and they had rock stars and comics, and it's entertaining, it's fun, it's amazing, but that's not for everyone. However, I think that it's worth sharing this to begin, because it's quite inspirational in at least thinking, what could you learn from it? What are the tricks that Salesforce might have used in their latest digital version that could be something that you could use, potentially even doing like Drift did, which is a sizable organization, but not nearly as large as Salesforce, who produced an event somewhat similar, the big umbrella event, if you will, with 22 partners. They went out to a lot of their sales and marketing relationships and produced a quite sizable online event, working with a lot of partners and helping them to put the investment together that was required to do an event that would have been bigger than Drift could have done on their own. And I think, at the end of the day, people may forget what you say, but they don't forget a poor user experience. Zoom presentations and their recordings are generally not broadcast quality. In fact, quite frankly, I'm shocked and dismayed at the schoolboy mistakes that you see when people go into just presentations for clients, where they look like a dark witness in a court case. You can't see their face. There's bright lights around them. They're stuck in the corner of the screen, and you only see part of their face. There's some very simple things that aren't done. But having said that, even just general production qualities are quite poor in overall. And things like which is very difficult to say. If you haven't come across it, it's well worth checking out, because it's a very simple app that was created by the guy who I think was the co-founder of Evernote. This was used at the TechCrunch event this year, and it's essentially an app that allows you to do an event over Zoom and a lot of other places and make it look like it's a broadcast show. You can do over the shoulder shots like you see here in this example, but you can also make your presence in the screen small or large, or use different filters. You can have more than one presenter. It's literally very cool. If you kind of are in events and you haven't come across this, I think you'll find it incredibly useful and fun. I think they're still only available on iOS, just like Clubhouse. All the cool kids only do Apple, I guess. But they do, I think, have an Android version coming soon, and it's worth checking out. So apologies for using Salesforce as an example twice, but Velocity do work with them as a client. And I share this as an example because they were helping them with some events that they were doing in Switzerland, and they found this very debonair Swiss guy that liked to do presentations, and he ended up being made into a very entertaining magazine show host for Salesforce. And they filmed it in the CNN studios. It was broadcast quality, but sent over the small screen. And I think the lesson here again is, to take a bit of take some lessons from other media. Just because it's on the small screen doesn't mean it can't have more professional production qualities and be more entertaining or infotaining, whatever the case may be.
5 minutes left, Michael.
Okay, and then quickly moving through the next few suggestions. The virtual stage, is it big enough? Sometimes people say, well, Zoom will be good enough, but they don't invest in the bigger platforms like Hopin or Brella that might have more technical capabilities. Obviously, that's not for everyone, and sometimes smaller is better. I've had a lot of B2B brands tell me that they get a lot more out of 10 to 20 participants where everybody's a speaker and everybody participates. And sometimes they even buy them a DoorDash lunch. So, the big events are fantastic if you've got the money, but the small events can sometimes be far more easy to get engagement. The community seems inherent in a lot of these things, but creating the tools so that people can talk to each other, not just at the event, but before and after, can also be very important to getting some ROI off of these events. This is an example from HubSpot's event from last year. Drift also do a great job of community. I think in terms of producing the content, there's a lesson to be taken from the TED events. There's a quote there, which if you don't have time enough to read while I'm speaking today, you can see it when I circulate the presentation. But essentially their DNA is that if you can't say it in 18 minutes, it's not important. So the idea is to constrain it so that you're really getting your key points across. Is there a reason why an event has to be 30 to 40 minutes or an hour? Can it not be 18 minutes, or could it be 6? Considering that people are watching a lot of this on demand anyways, do it in bite-sized nuggets. And last but not least, you might think Second Life is lame, and it's very well maybe, but there are quite a number of platforms now that create virtual landscapes for you to do live events in, and they're fun. They're novel, and they actually do work far better than you expect them to. The downside primarily is that a lot of times there's downloads of software, and that can be an issue with registrations. But there's 3 or 4 in the notes of the blog that I'll share that you might want to check out. So rounding off this presentation, I'm going to share 2 examples of the relationships I'm working with. One is called Spark Creative. I mentioned infotainment earlier. This is even closer to branded entertainment. Spark is a parody improv comedy team that produce content for brands, a lot of times around events. It's sketch comedy, it's improv comedy, and it really keeps people engaged and leaned into the events. And then last but not least, Velocity was the reason I put this presentation together, because it came out of the blog, but they do a lot of content around their own blog that I think you could find useful. And that's me in terms of kind of virtual events. Hopefully that gives you a bit of inspiration of some ideas that could make your own programs a bit better. And happy to have any questions if there's any time left.
Yeah, there's about 1 minute and 39 seconds. I put a couple links in the chat of the platforms that you
and they're all in the blog,
okay.
So I can circulate the blog and it's all there.
Okay, great. Any questions for Michael on virtual events?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, Rochelle.
I wasn't sure. Do you do what's going on with the not-for-profit sector? Because it's one thing to have one of these corporate events, but how are you doing with non-for-profits? Are they doing better, worse online, about the same? I mean, what's your experience, or have you had any with that market?
The quick answer is I don't have experience in not-for-profit. Most of the events that I'm working in are B2B. So I honestly can't say, apart from the ones that I've watched myself. I've noticed, as we've seen through COVID, that a lot of these not-for-profits have used celebrities to be able to do kind of online interviews and at least be able to get some attention that they're lacking from doing their normal events.
Okay, that's interesting.
Michael, I have a few clients who specifically do nonprofit marketing, capital campaign outreach, things like that. And so just what they've reported is that obviously, their events are down, their contributions are down, but the events that they have had, they're netting out far higher than they would if they put on a gala and raised a
Right.
$250,000, but then had to spend 100 grand on the event and on celebrities. And so they're still doing their auctions and things like that, but they're netting out much higher percentages than they would with an in-person fundraiser event.
Great. Thank you, Steve. And Steve and everybody, I put in the chat Michael Toedman's listing on trustref.net, and you can contact him through that. It's listed under Soho Syndicate. So if you put in Toedman, you wouldn't be able to find him. I'm going to try to fix that or add a feature so that you can search for other members on the site without knowing their company name. So, for example, Sarita, instead of knowing that she is under Grit, you would be able to find her under Sarita. All right.
I mean, they say constraint leads to creativity, but I think in online events, it's almost actually kind of just the constraint sometimes is our own minds. We have this preconceived concept of what an online event is or should be. And it's, I guess the underlying thread of the outline was meant to be, try to look at it as events, but content that lives. So think about the number of ways people might consume this content, and hopefully change your frame a bit in the way you produce it and distribute it.
Oh, and Michael, I do have a question.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is Sarita. So with your B2B, I'm curious as to what you're seeing with the trends in terms of charging for events, especially if a company relies on some of these events to generate revenue. Or what are the trends that you've seen within the last year?
There was an initial shock period, which I'm sure all of us noticed in our own relationships, where everything was free. Even very expensive events were often free of charge for a short period of time, at least, or heavily discounted. And I think we're starting to see more and more people say, no, we're going to charge for this, but they're still charging a lot less than they did before, simply because if you're doing Advertising Week, as an example, one of the biggest marketing events in the world, previously you bought a table for whatever it was, several $1,000s at the awards program, and you were there for 3 or 4 days or a week. You're not doing that. So if you want people to participate in the awards that they're doing, they're heavily relying upon sponsorship more than subscription or charges for people to attend. And if there is an attendance fee, it's usually 10% of what they would have charged otherwise. And the other thing that I'm seeing a lot of is people providing you with a free experience and then a modest cost to get into a bit more of an interaction with more interesting speakers. So you'll be able to get the keynotes if you pay the small amount, but you don't get any of the breakouts, you don't get any of the networking. And again, people don't come just for the speakers, they come for the networking. So I think it's not simply do I charge or do I not charge? It's what can I do in addition to charging a modest amount to make it more enticing and to potentially have other revenue streams. I know a guy that did a Bitcoin event that is used to bringing about 5,000 people to New York, charging $1,000 a person. He made more money on sponsorship and had over 20,000 attending on a digital event. So, what seems to be the obvious that this could be an opportunity is nowhere near as easy as it sounds, but it is possible.
I can say something on that.
Last comment.
I've attended events where, as you would mention, the entry level is relatively modest, and then they upsell you later on. And a lot of these presenters make a lot on the sponsors. This one event that I attended, she must have had 25 sponsors, and I really believe she netted more because the production rate is so much less. So as you were mentioning earlier, you may be netting, you may be making less, but netting more because your overhead is so much lower.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. So it looks like somebody dropped off. I think Mark Troy dropped off. We got it's a small group, but we have 35 minutes left. But we'll still do it at 2 minutes. Just won't be as strict if somebody goes over. I dropped in the chat the order in which people showed up, and does anybody have to leave early? for any reason? Okay. So it will be Mark Tebow, Steve Guberman, Jason Kramer, and then Audrey, and you'll see in the chat. And I'm going to go to speaker view so that whoever's speaking will be highlighted in the full screen on the recording. So if everybody else would mute, so that it picks up on the whoever's speaking. So everybody go on mute. And Mark, you're up.
Hi, Mark Tebow, Growth Strategy Advisors. What we do is effectively pre-branding. I do market analysis, competitive discovery, market trending, and our whole focus is around finding additional business for clients, and also for putting companies together. So a lot of times, we'll look at a situation where company A is owned by an investment bank, and they may want to put company B, and we'll verify if that makes a lot of sense. So we do a lot of primary research. I do a lot of secondary research. I actually love doing secondary research. I love calling people on the phone and talking to them. And, eventually we do some customer experience too. So that's what we do.
And based in South Florida, and does a
Yes,
lot of
sir.
work with both PE firms and then directly with brands, correct?
That's correct. We do work with some brands, and a lot of those brands tend to be technology brands.
Neat. Okay. And anything that you've done lately that's worth discussing or highlighting?
Well, actually, I had a pretty interesting discussion, actually a small project recently where we went on a second go around with a telehealth company, and we basically followed up on what we did 2 years ago to see if the market was still valid, and which it turned out that it pretty much was. In fact, it sort of hopped, because one thing with telemedicine and the pandemic is it really skyrocketed. And that was one of the things they really wanted to see.
Cool. Good timing. Okay, so let's use that as our sort of theme, something recent and interesting. So Steve Guberman, you're up.
Awesome. Thanks for the lead in, Mark. And thanks for the great presentation, Michael. Definitely interested in kind of chatting a little further offline about what you do and your biz dev services. My name is Steve Guberman. I own a company called Outsight Consultancy. I work with owners of creative marketing, digital, and PR firms to help them get the most out of their agencies. I have 20 years of agency experience, having owned, built up, and eventually sold my branding and web development firm after 10 years. I sold it to a PR firm who acquired my agency so that we could relaunch theirs as a full service strategic marketing firm. Spent 5 years there building up their creative and digital teams, putting operations in place, procedures, cross-selling services between the different client bases. Now, I left there a little over a year ago thinking I'd spend the second half of my career brand side, and I went corporate again and joined the Devils, not the New Jersey Devils, but the corporate side of the world, and realized quickly that I had a better calling. My entrepreneurial spirit pulled me back into launching my own agency, but I'm not doing tactical design work any longer. I'm not doing building websites or brand strategies any longer. Instead, I'm working with owners to help them focus on their personal balance with the agency, the people that they have on their team, profits, their processes and operations, and their positioning and how well they're marketing themselves. I launched my agency, in a pandemic, not in a pandemic, sorry, in a recession, thinking that I'd be able to take off random Tuesdays to go see my kids' school play, and I'd make a ton of money right away. And I quickly realized that I was doing every job that the agency needed, excluding the thing that I really loved doing, which was design. And I was barely making any personal money, and I had no personal balance. So flipped all that, built a really healthy agency, and I'm bringing those experiences to agency owners to help them get the most out of their agencies. looking to make introductions and work with agencies with under 50 employees. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. After, let's see, Steve, then Jason, Audrey, and Sarita. So Jason, you're up.
Thanks, Michael. Jason Kramer with Cultivize, based in New York, about an hour and a half north of Manhattan. So Cultivize is a unique company in the sense that we're super, super niche. Our focus is to help companies connect their dots between their data, typically their CRM data, their outbound and inbound marketing efforts, and their sales efforts. So we are a New York Platinum certified SharpSpring partner, one of the only ones in New York. SharpSpring is a platform like a HubSpot or a Pardot and Infusionsoft, a little bit, but more sophisticated, if you will. So we're looking for companies that have already an effort to generate leads. We do not do any lead gen. We don't do any marketing for our clients. So our clients are typically spending 30 grand to 50 grand or more a year on inbound marketing with an agency. And what they lack is the sales process and the internal systems to actually take those leads and bring them through the pipeline, nurture and educate those leads in order to convert them to a customer. So a good fit for us are both B2B and direct-to-consumer businesses that either have no CRM, no type of technology that their marketing and sales team is using on a daily basis, or the technology they have is fragmented and nothing's really connected and working together. Good synergy partners for us are actual digital agencies. We have over a dozen agencies across the US, and we talked about different stories. So we just brought on a company in Seattle who's an agency who's been with SharpSpring for a number of years, and we're helping to really take over their limited knowledge of the platform. So we're able to help escalate the performance of their clients using the platform as a white label service. We also work with agencies that are not using any marketing automation so that they could offer that as another value add to their customers. So beyond just getting people up to bat and saying to the client, hey, you need to hit the ball and swing, we're able to offer another complement to the lead gen effort, which is, as we all know, getting the lead is great. Being able to convert the lead into a customer is another part of the challenge, and that's something we can help with. So again, Jason Kramer with Cultivize.
Thank you, Jason. Okay.
Thank you.
Are
One
we
sec,
able to ask
Jason,
a quick question?
yeah.
So Jason, just this is probably a long answer, but I'd be interested in the quick one. I'm using HubSpot, and I think I'm still finding what I've always found, which is that they're very greedy, and they charge a lot very quickly for a small business. How's the comparison from HubSpot to SharpSpring in that regard?
We're less than half the cost of HubSpot and offer everything that you would get at the enterprise level for half the price of the mid-level of HubSpot. So we're roughly at about $1,500 a month for everything, including strategy and other things beyond just the software. But I'm happy to chat with you, Michael, and set up a call to go more into that.
Okay.
Cool.
And
That's what it's all
Jason,
about.
in general, how many people in an office, like, you know, should they have 6 salespeople, 30 salespeople? What would be a sweet spot for you?
Yeah,
keep
so just
going?
real quick on that, and I know we're pressed for time, but Rochelle, the answer is anywhere from like 2 to 30 salespeople. There has to be somebody full time. So for us, it's not about the number of people that are focused on sales. It's about how good are they, and are they actually going to adopt a new system and a new strategy? That's the most important thing.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's move
Thanks for the
on.
questions.
Absolutely. So Audrey, Sarita, and then Rochelle. Audrey, you're up.
Hi, everybody. Audrey Clover-Dichter. I'm an attorney in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I help small, medium businesses protect themselves from their own websites by minimizing legal risk for potential lawsuits arising out of those websites for false, misleading advertising, ADA non-compliance, privacy violations, advertising law violations, and of course, intellectual property infringement. So I review marketing campaigns for legal compliance. I always start with federal law, and I always start with the FTC because that is the main umbrella. And then I bring in whatever other federal and state federal agencies, and of course, we read for state agencies as well. to make sure they're legally compliant. And then, of course, depending what the business of the product is, what the service is, I will bring in other agencies because everybody has their own rules on advertising. And then, of course, we're all reliant on online presence. So I particularly focus now more than ever on websites and social media because there seems to be a rise out of those two for enforcement and lawsuits. I even posted about it last week, how like the language from the FDA specifically said, we looked at your website and we looked at your social media. So whatever goes online needs to be reviewed to make sure that, you're not, that you are compliant with federal, state, and local regulations. I focus on startup, small, medium businesses, businesses that don't have in-house counsel and need the help. Also, or they may have in-house counsel, but they don't have the necessary skills. I work and I team up with agencies in particular and web designers to, I help with the legalities. I draft all the documents and then they do all the back end legal compliance. Audrey Glover Dictor, thank you so much. If anybody needs to reach out to me, I'll put in my information on the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, everybody should do that. Sarita, Rochelle, then Christina.
Hey, hello everyone. I'm Sarita Jackson with GRIT, Global Research Institute of International Trade. Just want to throw out a quick statistic from the recession that when you look at manufacturing firms, small, medium, mid-sized companies, those companies that actually exported saw a 35% increase in revenue compared to the non-exporters saw a 7% decline in revenue. So what I do is I work with companies, SMEs, that are looking to increase their revenue by expanding to the global market. My most recent project was with a food manufacturer exporting from West Africa to the United States. I work with companies, it can either be US companies exporting or companies from other countries exporting to the United States. And with this particular project, which was right before the pandemic, where I conducted customized market research so that this gentleman could have a targeted approach, a strategy, a roadmap, and a timeline in connection with the proper resources so that he could export his agricultural product to the United States, manufacture it into a healthy snack, and sell here in the United States. And as a result of that work that I did for him, it saved him a lot of time trying to cut through all of the clutter of data and information that you can find so that he has a laser focused approach and could focus on his business and focus on increasing revenue once he started selling in the US market. And so in terms of companies, upcoming project, something even more recent, just in case anyone is interested, is that I do collaborate with other organizations, educational institutions. I'm located in California. So with Cal State San Bernardino and the Small Business Administration, speaking of online events, we are hosting a global access program where we do connect small businesses with resources in other countries. And our focus, March 4th, wow, I finally made it, talking a long time. March 4th with Singapore. So I'll put in my information and you'll have more information on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarita. Okay. And it would be Rochelle, Christina, and Mark. I'm sorry, Keith. So Rochelle, you're up.
Good morning. It's Rochelle from Dynamic Business Growth. And I always say it's dynamic business growth and not schlep along business growth. So recently, when one of the key skills in business, and Jason knows this, and we all do, your key skill in business is sales, and we may not be here next year, bottom line. And when we sell, we need to present. And when we present, I always ask, are you storytelling or boring telling? Did you just drown me? And I mean, drown me with facts and figures that I can barely remember anything you said, and it all kind of clumps together? Or did you tell me some sort of an emotional, compelling story that based on that story, I'm going to get a sense of your high level thinking? I'm going to get a sense of how are you distinguishing yourself from anybody else in your particular vertical. So if you're going to a networking event and somebody says, I'll give you an example, my name is Alan and I'm an accountant, the chances of me recognizing what specific problem he solves and what's his high level thinking is basically slim to none. But if he tells me a story about how he pulled a rabbit out of a hat, how did he save the day for his client, I'm going to say, wow, this guy is really up there. This guy really has the skills that I need, not only for myself, but others in my community. So recently I'm doing a lot of work, no matter how long you're in business, very often it's very hard to, what I say, we can't give ourselves a great haircut. We're too emotionally connected to our own stuff to distinguish how do we speak about it effectively. So I'm working with a lot of solo practitioners recently that they finally say, when I go to an event, my palms are sweating, my stomach is churning, and I mumble and I barely pray that it's over when when they go on to the next person. And it shouldn't be that way. If we can't make each networking opportunity work for us, we're really wasting our time. So I'd love you to think about individuals, a lot of solo practitioners, especially in industries that are common, such as banking, accounting, legal. And let's see if we can get those dynamic stories, because I'm a relentless support for everyone's dynamic business growth.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. Okay.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Christina, and then Keith. And if Mark Troy is still around, then it would be Mark. But so Christina, you're up.
I always fear going after Rochelle and having a boring story. I'm Christina Hagopi, and I own a graphic design and creative direction company. It's 18 years old, so I always say, I'm starting to become an old lady in this business. Some of the early parts of our designs were, with the dial-up world. So we've come a long way in those years. We do traditional design as far as logos and branding and what does your brand look like, sound like, feel like. But we've also emerged as experts in the e-commerce space and driving traffic to those websites through email. And when I say email, it's not the dirty world of email. It's the beautiful world of email where someone looks forward to opening up your messages and finds value and wants to click on them and wants to be a part of your email list. We find that email is the highest conversion rate for e-commerce especially, and we love to help e-commerce brands drive traffic and revenue through really dynamic storytelling through messages and email. I've known Michael for many years. We've partnered together where my team does the design and his team does the development. I love to find partnerships like that. I find that in my years, I don't like working alone, and that's a hard thing to do when you're a small business and a solo owner. I always say also, I wish I had a partner in the business, but finding a partner has been just as challenging as finding a husband. So, but my partners are my clients, and I work well in the luxury and lifestyle brands, and any client that's having trouble converting sales through email is a really good lead for us. If you have an e-commerce store that isn't performing as well, we can certainly help drive sales through email.
Thank you, Christina. Okay, and she's in beautiful Harwichport, Massachusetts.
For now.
As it says right above your head. Okay. Keith Reynolds, you're up.
Hey, everybody. Good morning still. 15 minutes left in the morning. It's great to see everybody. I have a company called Publio, and we are a content strategy company. And so I work with clients to help them organize and get themselves up and online in a way that's connected to their business objectives. We're a consulting, training and development, and media company. And we use innovative and collaborative tools and techniques to empower disruptors, people who really want to make a dent in the world, to build their influence in their space and differentiate themselves from the pack in order to drive demand and leads for their business and grow. Can I just show something real quick on my screen, Michael?
Yep, you should be able to do it.
So about 6 years ago, I was in a boardroom at Kodak and was leading a discussion with executives. And at the end of the day, I found on the whiteboard was this outline. And I wrote a book based on that. And I found that these 7 steps or buckets, working with executives, really tie their content and their digital presence to their goals. And so what I'm doing now post-COVID is just focusing on working with teams and executives to build their content strategy. We do research in the first step and then apply that research and SEO work into this 7-bucket model in order to come up with a strategy that they can work with their internal team and their agency and other freelancers. It's been a really successful model. I've now closed 9 for 9 deals in the last year, and have really found that the front end of this is where people need a lot of help and structure. So I'm now closing a deal with a company that has a hitting mat to teach neuromuscular skills to batters. I've worked with Jason here online with us today, and also I have produced 20 hours of programming for Stanford Innovation Week in the last year. So that's what I'm doing, and I appreciate the chance to share.
All right. Thank you so much. Let me see if I can you stop sharing? How do I do this? Stop participant sharing. There you
Did
go.
you get that?
Yep. All right.
Okay.
I'm going back to gallery view because for some reason it doesn't highlight me in speaker view. So timer. My name is Michael Bendit. I'll talk about something that recently came up. I got a inquiry from one of my marketing partners. They're a digital marketing agency. They have about 15 or 18 people, a couple of programmers, but they often come across projects that they just don't have the skills for or don't have the bandwidth to handle. And so this was a Magento opportunity. And Magento is a fairly advanced e-commerce platform. It comes in an open source version and a paid version. They were bought by Adobe, and it's a big push for them, but it's a complicated platform. And I have a couple of teams, actually 3 different teams, that have skills with specialize in Magento. And you may ask, so why do you need 3 different teams? Well, one of them actually specializes within that, they only do Magento rescue, meaning somebody else screwed it up. Now we're going to come in and fix it for you. Because, there's a lot of work there. They don't like to do Magento from scratch because they found that their clients have, unreasonable expectations relative to their budgets when it comes to new projects. And then I have 2 other teams. One is a completely offshore team based in Ukraine that specializes in Magento. And because they're completely offshore, they are somewhere around $65 an hour. Not as cheap as if it were in India, but they have really great talent in Ukraine. And the other one is more of a hybrid. About a third of their staff is here, and 2/3 are offshore, and they're closer to like $120 an hour. So, it turns out we're likely to work with the Ukraine team. That's a better fit for them. And I do a lot of work with agencies like that. So, we specialize in the development of e-commerce sites, websites, and mobile applications. Okay, time flies when you're speaking. I have a couple of things, a couple of requests. One is, and for anybody who was here on the call last week, I had asked folks to go to this Survey Monkey, which I'm putting in the chat now, and answer one question regarding our membership and the requirements. So right now, in fact, I will share the screen of the Survey Monkey. One sec. Share screen, Survey Monkey. So right now, members, we have these three network clients. They're MarTech companies, and they pay us we have an agreement where they will pay us a commission for any leads we bring to them. It's a great way, potentially a great way to bring, to fund this network, but it's a little bit, I would say, tangential to the focus of the network. So I am thinking about and would like your input on whether we should change that to, instead of having members bring leads to these companies, which in turn bring funds and commissions both to the lead generator and to the network. Instead, have members require that members make 4 qualified referrals in 6 months, where a qualified referral is either a new business lead to another member or a referral of a new TRN member. And would like your feedback on whether you think that makes sense. Simple yes or no, and any comments. Are people able to get to that link? Did anybody try it? I want to make sure I got the whole link in there. Should be this.
It worked.
It worked. Okay. And so, I'm certainly looking to expand the network, particularly outside of the New York area. It's great to have people in Florida and LA and Massachusetts on this call, and always looking to add to that. I guess we've got Connecticut and a little further upstate New York and more California. And Steve, you're in New Jersey. I'm in New Jersey. So it is spreading out a little bit. And then, of course, if you haven't already taken ownership of your listing, please do so and customize it to your own, the way you want it to look and the way you want it to speak. So you've got a description in there, and you've got some other information that you can put in there to make sure people can contact you. And that's pretty much all I have to say. If you have questions about that, please reach out to me. Happy to help out with getting your listing customized.